Before we begin, take a breath, then hit subscribe, leave a comment, and stay locked in, because stories like this don't just unfold, they close in on you. And once you're inside Albany, New York, USA tonight, there's no easy way out. The night Albany held its breath. The sirens cut through Albany, New York, USA like a blade. They came from every direction: State Street, Central Avenue, the narrow residential roads where porch lights flickered on one by one as neighbors stepped outside, confused, frightened, already sensing that something terrible had just happened. Red and blue lights bounced off brick walls and parked cars, washing the quiet capital city of New York in frantic color. It was 11:47 p.m. in Albany, New York, USA, when the first patrol unit arrived. By 11:49 p.m., they were taping off the street, and by midnight, one young man was dead. His body lay near the edge of a dimly lit intersection, the cold pavement beneath him still warm from the day's heat. A single spent shell casing rested a few feet away, glinting under the street lamp like a cruel punctuation mark. No weapon in sight, no suspect in custody. Just silence, broken only by police radios and the low murmur of gathering officers. In Albany, New York, USA, murders are rare enough that each one leaves a scar. This one felt different from the start, because witnesses kept saying the same thing. It was a kid, not a hardened criminal, not a career offender, a teenager. Detective Marcus Hale arrived minutes later, his expression already tight with frustration. He had worked homicides in Albany, New York, USA for over a decade, long enough to recognize the pattern forming before him. A late-night shooting, no immediate arrest, conflicting witness statements, and now a rumor spreading faster than facts that the shooter wasn't even old enough to legally buy a handgun. Hale crouched beside the body, careful not to disturb the scene. The victim was in his early 20s, dressed casually, no obvious gang markings, no visible weapon. That alone raised questions. Albany, New York, USA had seen its share of street disputes, but this didn't look like a random act of violence. This looked personal. Across the street, a woman stood shaking, her phone clutched to her chest. She had heard the argument. She had heard the shout. Then the gunshot, sharp, final, impossible to forget. "He ran that way," she said, pointing down a dark side street. "He was young. I swear, he was just a kid." In Albany, New York, USA, those words carried weight. Within hours, the case took over the department. Surveillance footage was pulled from nearby businesses. Cell phone videos surfaced online, grainy and incomplete, spreading through Albany, New York, USA before investigators could even finish their first round of interviews. Social media filled the gaps with speculation, fear, and anger. A teenager with a gun, a young man dead, a city demanding answers. By morning, Albany, New York, USA woke up to headlines that felt unreal. The victim's name was released later that day. He had family in Albany, New York, USA. Friends, a job, a future that ended on a street corner in less than a second. Detective began tracing his final hours, where he had been, who he had spoken to, what could possibly have escalated into deadly violence. That trail led them to a small circle of teens known to hang around the neighborhood. And one name kept resurfacing: a 16-year-old boy. Because of his age, officials in Albany, New York, USA would not release his identity. But within the community, everyone seemed to know who he was. A local kid, grew up nearby, no long criminal record, no reputation as a killer, which made the next discovery even more unsettling. The shooting wasn't random. Investigators uncovered text messages exchanged earlier that night. Heated, emotional, threatening. Something had gone wrong. Money, respect, pride, all three tangled together. The victim had agreed to meet someone. A meeting that never should have happened. As detectives reconstructed the timeline, the pieces started to align in disturbing ways. The teen had left home that evening telling his family he was just going out for a bit. Surveillance cameras captured him walking toward the meeting point. Another camera, blocks away, showed him running afterward, panic written into his body language. In Albany, New York, USA, that footage became a turning point. But it wasn't enough. They needed the weapon. Pressure mounted fast. Community leaders in Albany, New York, USA called for calm, while privately urging police to move quickly. The fact that a teenager was involved made the case explosive. Parents looked at their own children differently. Schools increased security. Conversations shifted from sports and weather to fear and blame. Detective Hale felt it every time he stepped into the precinct. "A kid doesn't pull a trigger by accident," one officer said quietly. "But a kid also doesn't fully understand what comes after," another replied. That tension sat at the heart of the investigation. 2 days later, the teen turned himself in. He arrived at the Albany Police Department with a family member, eyes down, shoulders slumped, the weight of the city already pressing on him. He didn't speak to the media. He didn't resist. He just walked through the doors and disappeared into a system that would decide the rest of his life. But what he told investigators raised even more questions. He admitted to being there. He admitted to the confrontation. But he claimed the gun went off during a struggle. In Albany, New York, USA, prosecutors had heard that story before, and they didn't believe it. As the case moved forward, forensic evidence began to tell a colder, clearer story. Ballistics matched the shell casing to a handgun later recovered in a trash bin several blocks away. Gunshot residue contradicted the teen's version of events. And then there was a witness, someone who hadn't come forward at first, out of fear. Someone who said there was no struggle, just a decision. That witness changed everything. Behind closed doors, prosecutors in Albany, New York, USA made a controversial choice. They would seek to try the teen as an adult. The severity of the crime demanded it. They argued. One life had ended. Another had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Defense attorneys pushed back, painting a picture of immaturity, panic, and irreversible regret. They spoke of brain development, peer pressure, and a moment that spiraled out of control. But the city of Albany, New York, USA was watching closely now. This wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about consequences. The courtroom filled on the first day of hearings. Family members sat on opposite sides, separated by aisles and unimaginable grief. One family mourning a son who would never come home. Another staring at a boy who might never be free again. The teen kept his eyes on the table. The victim's mother did not. In Albany, New York, USA, the air felt heavy enough to suffocate. As testimony unfolded, the story became darker, more complicated, and harder to ignore. The meeting had been planned. The gun had been brought intentionally. Words had been exchanged that couldn't be taken back. And then came the final piece of evidence. A message sent minutes before the shooting. Not from the victim, from the teen. A message that suggested intent. Not fear, not panic, but resolve. When prosecutors read it aloud, the courtroom fell silent. Because if that message was taken at face value, it meant the shooting in Albany, New York, USA wasn't an accident at all. It was a choice. And just when everyone thought they understood what had happened that night, investigators revealed something else, something buried deep in the digital trail, overlooked until now. A second conversation, a second motive, a reason no one had seen coming. And when the judge ordered that evidence brought forward, even seasoned detectives felt a chill. Because if it was true, then the shooting in Albany, New York, USA wasn't just about anger or confrontation. It was about betrayal. And when they traced that final lead back to its source, they realized the case was far from over. Because the real reason for the shooting had been hiding in plain sight. The truth tightens its grip. Albany, New York, USA did not sleep the night the second motive surfaced. By sunrise, word had spread through the courthouse corridors, police hallways, and quiet neighborhoods where curtains twitched and phones buzzed nonstop. The case was no longer just about a teenage mistake or a confrontation gone wrong. It had transformed into something colder, more deliberate, and far more dangerous. Detective Marcus Hale stood in the evidence room of the Albany Police Department, staring at a glowing monitor. Lines of text messages, timestamps, and call logs filled the screen. What looked like teenage noise at first glance, arguments, insults, half-formed threats, now told a much darker story. This wasn't impulse. This was planning. And in Albany, New York, USA, planning meant intent. The second conversation investigators had uncovered wasn't between the teen and the victim. It was between the teen and someone else, someone older, smarter, and far more careful. A shadow figure who never appeared on surveillance footage, never showed up at the scene, and never pulled the trigger, but whose influence lingered everywhere. The messages were vague by design. No names, no weapons mentioned outright, just coded language, references to handling it, not backing down, and sending a message. Prosecutors in Albany, New York, USA immediately recognized the danger. This suggested manipulation, possibly coercion, possibly something much worse. If the teen hadn't acted alone, then the entire case shifted. And so did the risk. Detective Hale knew what that meant. When multiple people were involved, someone always panicked. Someone always tried to clean things up after the fact. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their minds. Sometimes people vanished. Albany, New York, USA had seen it before. Investigators began quietly re-interviewing witnesses. Not loudly, not publicly. They moved carefully, aware that someone out there might still be watching. The teen sat in juvenile detention, isolated, his attorneys warning him to say nothing more. But others weren't so protected. One witness, a friend of the victim, initially claimed to have left before the confrontation. But now, faced with phone records placing him nearby, his story began to unravel. He admitted he had seen the teen earlier that night. And he wasn't alone. There was another guy, the witness said, voice shaking. He didn't say much. He just watched. In Albany, New York, USA, silence like that carried meaning. The description was vague but consistent. Older than the teen. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Calm, unemotional. The kind of presence that made others nervous without saying a word. When detectives ran the description through their system, a name surfaced almost immediately. Someone already known to Albany, New York, USA law enforcement. Not for violent crime, but for influence. A local figure, street-connected, careful enough to stay just outside the reach of major charges. And suddenly, the shooting took on a new dimension. Prosecutors faced a difficult choice. If they pursued this new angle aggressively, they risked exposing witnesses to retaliation. But if they didn't, they risked leaving a deeper truth buried and allowing someone else to walk free while a teenager took the full fall. In Albany, New York, USA, that kind of decision could define careers. They chose to dig. As the investigation widened, pressure on the teen intensified. Alone in his cell, cut off from family, haunted by what he'd done, he began to crack. His attorneys noticed it immediately. So did the guards. So did the investigators watching from a distance. The bravado was gone. The anger had faded. What remained was fear, not of prison, of someone else. During a routine check, the teen finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to go like that, he whispered. In Albany, New York, USA, those words echoed louder than any confession. He didn't name names, not yet, but he talked about pressure, about being told he had to prove himself, about consequences if he didn't, about a sense that backing out wasn't an option. Detectives listened carefully, recording every word, because this wasn't just mitigation. It was motive-led on motive, and it suggested that the real danger hadn't ended with the shooting. Meanwhile, outside the detention center, tensions in Albany, New York, USA continued to rise. The victim's family demanded justice, insisting that nothing could excuse what had happened. Community activists warned against shifting blame away from the shooter. Others argued the teen was being used as a pawn in a much larger game. The city split along uneasy lines. And then something happened that no one expected. A key witness recanted. Without warning, without explanation. One day they were cooperating. The next, they refused to answer calls. When detectives finally tracked them down, the witness claimed they couldn't remember important details anymore. In Albany, New York, USA, that was a red flag. Detective Hale pressed gently, but the witness shut down completely. Eyes darting, hands shaking, afraid. When Hale asked why the sudden change, the witness said only one thing. I've got a family. That was enough. Surveillance was ramped up. Patrols increased. Investigators began working under the assumption that someone was actively interfering with the case. someone who understood how close they were getting. Then came the break. A burner phone, found during a routine traffic stop in Albany, New York, USA. The driver claimed it wasn't his. No contact saved. No photos. But the phone's location data placed it repeatedly near the teen in the weeks leading up to the shooting. And on the night it happened, the phone had gone dark. Forensic analysts worked through the night. Slowly, carefully, they reconstructed fragments of deleted messages. Enough to see a pattern. Enough to confirm communication. Enough to prove the teen hadn't acted in isolation. But not enough, yet, to bring new charges. And time was running out. As the sentencing phase approached, prosecutors faced mounting pressure. The teen had already pleaded guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for avoiding a full trial. The deal included a sentence of 12 years to life, a rare and severe outcome for someone so young in Albany, New York, USA. The courtroom would decide his fate. But what about the others? Behind closed doors, discussions grew tense. Do they accept the plea and secure conviction? Or risk everything by pushing for more, knowing the teen might stop cooperating entirely? The answer came from an unexpected place. Days before sentencing, the teen requested to speak again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He said if I didn't do it, someone else would, the teen confessed. And it wouldn't be clean. The room went silent, because that wasn't fear talking anymore. That was regret. Names were finally spoken. Investigators moved quickly, knowing that once information reached the streets of Albany, New York, USA, it couldn't be pulled back. Warrants were drafted. Phones were tapped. Eyes turned toward the man who had stayed invisible for far too long. But when officers arrived at his last known address, they found nothing. No suspect. No phone. No trace. Just an empty apartment and a single item left behind on the kitchen table. A note. Short. Handwritten. Deliberate. It read, "You're too late." In Albany, New York, USA, that message changed everything. Because now, the case wasn't just about a sentence. It was about a missing player, and a truth that might never fully come to light. As the teen prepared to stand before a judge and hear the words that would define the rest of his life, one question haunted everyone involved. Was justice about to be served? Or was Albany, New York, USA about to learn that the most dangerous person in the room had never been the one in handcuffs? 12 years to a lifetime. The courtroom in Albany, New York, USA was silent in a way that felt unnatural. No whispers. No shuffling feet. No nervous coughs. Just a heavy sound of breathing, dozens of people holding it at the same time. The teen stood at the defense table, hands clasped in front of him, shoulders narrow beneath an oversized suit that looked borrowed, not owned. He was still legally a child, yet everything about this moment belonged to the adult world. The kind of world that didn't offer second chances easily. Not in Albany, New York, USA. Not anywhere. Behind him, his family sat frozen. His mother stared at the floor, as if eye contact with reality might shatter her. Across the aisle, the victim's family sat upright, rigid, holding onto one another like survivors of a storm that refused to end. The judge entered, and with that, the future locked into place. Outside the courthouse, Albany, New York, USA buzzed with quiet tension. News vans lined the street. Reporters spoke in hushed tones, rehearsing sentences they had repeated for weeks now. Locals slowed their steps, glancing toward the courthouse doors, knowing that whatever happened inside would echo far beyond these walls. This wasn't just another sentencing. This was a reckoning. The prosecutors stood first. They spoke of facts, of evidence, of choices. They reminded the court that on a single night in Albany, New York, USA, a young man had lost his life. Not to illness, not to chance, but to a gun raised by someone who knew exactly what it could do. They acknowledged the defendant's age, but refused to let it eclipse the outcome. One decision, the prosecutor said, voice steady, ended a life and shattered two families. They paused, and this court must decide what accountability looks like. The defense followed. They spoke of pressure, of influence, of immaturity shaped by fear and manipulation. They described a teenager pulled into something larger than himself, nudged, pushed, cornered by forces he didn't know how to escape. They spoke of regret so deep it had hollowed him out from the inside. This was not a monster, the defense said. This was a boy who made a catastrophic mistake. In Albany, New York, USA, the word mistake landed hard. Then came the victim impact statements. The victim's mother stood slowly, gripping the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. She spoke of birthdays that would never come, of phone calls that would never be answered, of a chair at the dinner table that would remain empty forever. "I don't hate you," she said, looking directly at the teen. "But I will never understand why my son had to die." In Albany, New York, USA, there were no dry eyes. The teen was given the chance to speak. He hesitated. Then he looked up. "I can't undo what I did," he said quietly. "I think about it every day, every night. I know sorry isn't enough. I know it never will be." His voice wavered when he mentioned his family, when he mentioned the victim, when he admitted that no matter how much pressure he'd felt, no one had forced his hand. "I'll live with this forever," he said. He wasn't wrong. The judge leaned forward. In Albany, New York, USA, this was a moment everything narrowed down to a single voice. The judge spoke carefully, deliberately, weighing every word like it might tip the scales of history. "You are young," the judge said, "but youth does not erase responsibility. The court has considered the influence of others, the circumstances surrounding this crime, and the irreversible harm caused." A pause. "For that reason, the court sentences you to 12 years to life in prison." Gasps rippled through the room. 12 years. Life. In Albany, New York, USA, the words hung in the air like smoke. The teen didn't move at first. Then reality set in. 12 years before he could even ask for freedom. Life if the system decided he hadn't owned it. Deputies stepped forward. Handcuffs clicked shut. The sound echoed louder than anyone expected. As he was led away, the teen turned once, just once, toward his family. His mother reached out instinctively, then froze, her hand suspended in the air, unable to bridge the distance between who he had been and who he was now. The doors closed, and just like that, Albany, New York, USA moved on to the next chapter. Or so it seemed. Behind the scenes, the other investigation quietly stalled. The older figure, the missing phone, the note left behind. "You're too late." Despite renewed efforts, no arrest was made. Leads dried up. Witnesses went silent again. The trail that had once felt so promising dissolved into fragments too weak to stand alone in court. Officially, the case was closed. Unofficially, many in Albany, New York, USA knew better. Months passed. The news cycle shifted. Headlines faded. Another story replaced this one. But in certain neighborhoods, in certain conversations, the questions never fully went away. Had justice been served, or had it simply been contained? Detective Marcus Hale visited the evidence room one last time before transferring off the case. He stood where he had stood months earlier, staring at the same files, the same unanswered gaps. A teenager behind bars, a family destroyed, and a shadow that had never been brought into the light. In Albany, New York, USA, that kind of ending stayed with you. From prison, the teen wrote letters, some to his family, some to himself. One, to the victim's family, never sent. He enrolled in classes. He kept his head down. God said he caused no trouble, that he aged quickly, that something in him had gone quiet. But at night, according to those closest to him, he still replayed that moment on the street in Albany, New York, USA. The sound, the shock, the instant where everything fractured. 12 years might pass, but that second would never leave him. Then, 3 months after sentencing, something strange happened. A routine traffic stop, another burner phone, another erased trail. This time, the location data placed a phone near the courthouse on the day of sentencing. Investigators noticed the pattern too late. Again. And though nothing came of it, no charges, no headlines, it reignited a fear many had tried to bury, that the full truth of what happened in Albany, New York, USA had never been told. The official record would always say the same thing. Teen sentenced. Case closed. justice delivered. But records don't capture everything. They don't capture the way a city feels when it realizes a story might be bigger than the ending it was given. They don't capture the silence of witnesses who chose survival over truth. They don't capture the uneasy sense that someone, somewhere, had learned exactly how to disappear. In Albany, New York, USA, people still talk about that night. About the teenager. About the shadow no one could prove existed. And about the cost of a single decision made under pressure. Some nights, when police lights flash across quiet streets, neighbors pause. They listen. They wonder. Because they know now how quickly everything can change. They know that in Albany, New York, USA, justice doesn't always arrive cleanly. Sometimes it arrives incomplete. Sometimes it arrives with questions that never stop knocking. And sometimes it arrives with one person behind bars, while another walks free, unseen, untouched, and already planning their next move. If this story pulled you in, disturbed you, or made you question what justice really looks like, remember, there are more cases like this waiting to be told. And the next one, it might be even closer than you think.